go into my usual spiel. Hello, folks. Welcome to another weekly roundup with myself, Bonnie Craven, and Sarah Grant today. No Steve. Will we cope, do you think?
We'll miss him.
Off. We're giving him a day off. He's been a busy man. He's been a busy lad. He's had a heck of a week. But we shall muddle on regardless. They put me in charge instead. One slaphead to another. Anyway, where should we start? Margaret Beckett is where I thought we'd start, mainly because she's really upset me this week. In case you missed it earlier this week at their regular meeting, the NEC had to debate the motion passed by many a CLP regarding the recall conference to restore democracy in the party. Left-wing NEC member Laura Pidcock went to bat for us on the left straight away when the right-wing dominated NEC decided that even though these were the democratic wishes of ordinary Labour members, CLPs across the country had passed this motion, they had no intention of even debating it, let alone voting for it. Such is the contempt they apparently have for us. Laura wasn't having it, but after being shut down, the NEC chair, Margaret Beckett, forgetting to turn her mic off, was heard to call her a silly cow afterwards. And Laura quite understandably left that meeting. Now, those loyal to Team Keith might think, well, so what? And indeed, many thought a lot worse on social media, backing Margaret Beckett's actions. But it's not acceptable. And in a week where we celebrate women, for a woman to be verbally abused like this, particularly by another woman, makes a mockery of it all. It isn't acceptable in Labour? No, it isn't acceptable. A Labour councillor, after all, in Wales, within the last week, having called a female Plaid Cymru politician a cow, has been suspended. So when can we expect Dame Margaret's suspension from the party? It'll be the 8th of never, because she'll get away with that mealy-mouthed apology she's offered. And it damages the party no end in the eyes of the public and its members. This is such an avoidable mess, but one that really upsets members. And just as local election campaigns kick off, it's playing with fire. Members suspended across the country for wanting their say. Regional offices taken over AGMs and rigging them. The former Labour leader whose 3-month suspension is over and remains suspended. And Keith admitted on TV this was his decision alone. And the NEC itself was rigged because by convention, Margaret Beckett should never have become chair to start with. And the NEC election system was too, to let some right-wing shits get on. And all the while the media cheer, having normalised abuse of the left. I have never known such toxic levels of divisiveness, all attributable to the leadership of Labour as it stands today. And there's no way it's going to end until they've gone and people like Margaret Beckett are relegated back to the back benches where they belong. And we have a proper representation of the members on our NEC again. What have you made of this mess this week, guys? Bonnie?
Well, you know, it's just very difficult as an elected officer of my local constituency party. And our CLP constituency Labour Party actually passed the motion for a recall of conference, obviously to challenge the unelected acting General Secretary of the Labour Party. So as an elected local official, it's really, really difficult for me to, despite that, turn around and say to our membership, well, we've got thousands of ELA leaflets arriving at our hall. We need you members to go out and deliver, and don't question the authority of those above us. You know, don't worry too much about the wording on the back of your membership card, which says that Labour is a social democratic party, because we're not seeing any democracy from those above us.
Sarah?
No, I totally agree. I mean, you know, as the chair of my CLP, it's my job to uphold member democracy. And it just seems those above us are just trying to dampen it down, you know, whatever happens. I mean, the thing with Margaret Beckett, I mean, she just, I mean, bearing in mind the protocol anyway, instilling her as the chair of the NEC, and it's just, for, in inverted commas, a party grandee to act like that in an official meeting. I don't care whether she thought a microphone were off or not. I literally don't care. Calling someone that in a meeting, in any walk of life, in any situation, is absolutely not acceptable in any situation. And the apology is just not good enough. And like you said, a man's done it and they're being suspended. So, you know, is it because it's Margaret Beckett? And I don't know, maybe, but it's not good enough in any case.
Well, you can't help but think that if the shoe had been on the other foot and Laura Pidcock had said it about Margaret Beckett, then a suspension definitely would be par for the course. The NEC is our leading representative body. For anybody to act with such a chronic level of bad manners, rudeness, immaturity, frankly, it's condemnable of the sort of people that have been put in this position of privilege. And for it to come from the chair of that body, of all people, I mean, she's offered an apology, but so what? It's not comparable to treatment that's been meted out to other people within our party around the country. As I said, a Welsh, I think he's head of the council actually there in Wales, has been suspended for saying exactly the same word, frankly. Why is there one rule for them and another rule for others? It cannot be the way in a democratic socialist party that anyone is treated differently to anybody else. Yet here it is, plain as day, quite blatantly in our face, at the highest level of the party. It's absolutely appalling. And like I said a moment ago, when we're just gearing up to start campaigning for the local election campaigns, it's playing with fire, because you're really going to upset the membership. They don't accept this. We don't accept this kind of treatment in the Labour Party. We don't tolerate it. And we certainly expect better from our leading representatives at all levels. Now, when it comes to the local election campaign, I've not seen a great deal of literature kicking about down here, but what I have seen on social media seems to have a very Keith-centric flavour. He seems to be on all the literature that I've seen. Why does he think it's a good idea to put his face on local election campaign literature? Last time I looked, he's not standing anywhere at local election level.
It's a bit of a vanity project, it feels like, to be honest with you. And I think it's probably a miscalculation on his part, because the way that his popularity ratings are going, he actually could cost us votes rather than win votes for the candidates that are standing locally.
Yeah. Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, like Bonnie said, I think he's overestimated his appeal, to be quite honest. I mean, speaking, you know, from Rotherham, his effect has been, you know, marginal, and you know, local campaign should be focused on the local candidates. So he's like releasing videos of him walking different places in the country as if it's a general election. That's what he's acting as. It's as if it's a general election, and I do think he's overestimated his popularity with members and, you know, voters. I mean, you know, the thing with the league table. With the telephone banking, I think the leadership are overestimating their popularity, and I think if Jeremy would have done it when he was in charge, he would have been absolutely slaughtered in the press and by the right wing of the party. So the fact that Starmer's doing it and getting away with it, it just tells you everything you need to know, really.
Yeah, the phone banking league tables. Well, Freeman and Ange offering themselves up for prizes. If you phone bank the most, we'll come on a phone bank with you. Aren't we special? Aren't you lucky? It is very much still in that vein, isn't it? He still seems to think he's this figure of admiration of, Keith. But yeah,
come to us, Keith. Come to us.
I just fail to see why. I mean, he's led Labour to a slump behind the most incompetent Tory government we have, up to 13 points behind, depending on which poll you look at. And that he still sees himself as a selling point is just bizarre. I mean, is he tin-eared? Is he just seeing through all the bad press? Does he just not see it? You're not a celebrity, Keir. You're an elected politician who has a big problem with policies, essentially not having any. But despite the fact that local candidates across the country will have local issues that they will want to deal with, that they will want to stand on, the literature that I've seen has Keir Starmer all over it, not the candidates. And it's cringeworthy. It's almost like the whole Joe Swinson thing with the bus again. It's that kind of, you know,
we're gonna have a bus, aren't we? We're going to have a bus with his face on it, aren't we?
Magenta one again.
Oh, dear.
Or maybe a nice shade of purple.
Like, yeah, purple.
Judging by the backdrops of recent speeches that those
Peter Mandelson touch, that purple background. It's every time he's got you saw it with Gordon Brown, we saw it with Tony Blair. That purple background, Mandelson, all over it.
But this ego and attitude from Keir Starmer to me stinks of white male privilege. This expectation that he's some hero that people are going to bow down to. And, you mentioned as well the abuse that Laura Pidcock had at the NEC meeting at the hands of, albeit another woman, but a very privileged woman in a position, she's a party grandee and so on. This is the same week that the TUC put out a statement about the amount of bullying and harassment in our society, and all of the trade unions pretty much that are affiliated to Labour signed this statement. So it's about time that we started applying the same standards in our party that has been born out of the trade unions. And that's not to say that there aren't issues other places, but party should be leading by example. And calling someone a cow is sexist abuse, actually. That stinks of misogyny, even if it's delivered by a woman.
Yeah. And you said it's March the 8th was International Women's Day. It's appalling that this story actually dominated that day quite substantially. When it comes to the local elections, I sincerely hope that there's going to be more literature coming out for the candidates that are standing and are pushing local issues that are important to them in their area, that actually feature the policies and feature what they want to stand for, because they ultimately are the people that are going to be elected. And what Starmer has started out with this is, I would argue, is damaging their prospects, even if he seems to think otherwise. It is self-aggrandizing narcissism. So I sincerely wish, but I can sincerely wish all candidates standing all around the country the very best, and hope that they have some solid policies to stand on, because they kind of need to have. It's not the end of the Labour stories this week. I mean, it's dominated our news again. More CLP problems around the country. The interference in local elections has continued this week as well. We're building up quite a list now. Liverpool, Streatham, Bristol West and others, and we now have East Ham, West Ham and Tottenham, all in your neck of the woods, Bonnie. Are you aware or appraised of what's been going on in your patch in the south?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I've got friends in all of those constituency parties, because we've got, we network quite well across London as a party, especially those of us on the left. But apparently there have been some investigations into what's gone on in Newham, and we're waiting to hear the truth. But this region-based attacks and clamping down on democracy in local constituency parties, I'm just not comfortable with it at all. If there are problems, they need to be investigated, and the officers who are elected to those constituency parties need to take a close look at what's gone on. But region jumping in so prematurely before there are any facts really widely known and understood by the membership and people in neighbouring constituency parties seems a dangerous precedent that's growing ever more.
Sarah?
There needs to be proper investigations go on first before region jumps in and makes it publicly known that these CLPs have been suspended. The investigation needs to be done first, and then do whatever's necessary. But yeah, it's not great, all these CLPs being suspended at all.
No. I mean, East Ham and West Ham CLP suspended on suspicion of electoral fraud in the end, I think it was, despite the police having already investigated and found no issue, apparently. So highly suspicious activity yet again. And in Tottenham, we've seen a carbon copy repeat of things that have dogged other CLPs that we've mentioned around the country, where the AGM has been taken over by regional. And so far elsewhere, they've successfully won things for their favoured right-wing candidates. And the ballots are being sent out via a non-voter, which itself there's issues surrounding at the moment. A non-voter, it's a little bit... we talked about Tory corruption and cronyism, and it looks like there's a story here with the non-voter contract, which CLPs are using to vote for under the current climate of COVID restrictions, as to how that contract has been handed out as well. We've got to be a little bit careful about who we might mention with that. But Bonnie, again, it stems back to your sort of neck of the woods a little bit, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously the names and people involved, the information's all out there on social media. So if anyone wants to look into it, I hope they do. Just for anyone who's watching who isn't aware of Untitled, what it is, it's an online voting system, because obviously we're not allowed to meet face to face due to coronavirus, and it is, you know, it keeps everyone safe if we do all our meetings over Zoom, much like this meeting. But there is a problem where it's anything other than a show of hands for a vote, which generally speaking are votes for individuals and for officer positions and conference delegates and that sort of thing. So generally speaking, those votes aren't taken as a show of hands. So what happens is the CLP secretary and chairman have to set up a system online to email vote ballots to members who attended the meeting, so they can click on it and say who they want to support and who they want to vote for. There is very certainly some quite serious questions about why we've gone to a non-voter. We previously used a different online voting system, and we switched quite recently to a non-voter. Yeah, I mean, in our CLP, we've managed to use it okay, but I know that there have been a lot of problems in other CLPs. It's actually a system that you can't possibly run at the same time as a meeting, because the admin of it would take time away from the officers actually managing the meeting that's happening. So what we do in our CLP is we tend to have the debate and then issue the ballot after the debate for returning, you know, by the close of play the next day. There have been an awful lot of problems and an awful lot of questions about integrity and its security and why we've gone to this system that's very expensive to the party.
Yeah, it's I mean, we talk week in, week out. We've covered various issues of levels of Tory corruption with regards to contracts that they've handed out to Tory donors and Tory mates, and of course we've had stories of that continuing again this week, especially with regards to the track and trace system, which has again been back in the news. But Labour is essentially removing any ability, any possibility of being able to challenge them from a moral high ground when there are questions being levied at our party too now over things like this. And when it's an internal matter at that, it's yet another example of an attack on the membership. Yet again, it seems to be the raison d'etre of this leadership ever since they've come in. It's just continue to attack the Labour membership to enforce their will, rather than trying to change the government's mind on various aspects, trying to challenge them and demonstrate a better way of doing things. They carry on. Yeah, they're just essentially painting themselves as being just as bad. We've got to get away with that. For too many years, people thought, well, there's not a fag paper to put between the Tories and Labour on a great deal of aspects. And then we had that dramatic change, and we had an enthused membership, and we had great policies, and we've just gone completely backwards on that again. And we're going back to the days of you can have Tory or you can have Tory light, and it's a depressing position to be in, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is, when we rely on our members to volunteer hours and hours of their time. I mean, another thing I think that plays into this story is the fact that hundreds of thousands of pounds of membership dues have gone into paying off court fees that, you know, for cases that the party could have and should have won. We've just paid off people and so on. So they're taking our membership fees, they're taking away democracy, they're expecting us to go out and deliver leaflets, even though, you know, I was quite shocked that we got a directive from London region that it's okay to go out and deliver leaflets at the moment. You know, we're in a lockdown. How is that essential business? It can't see that it's essential work to put leaflets through people's doors and so on. But, you know, it's really hard motivating members to get up and go out and campaign with all of these sort of abuses on our will taking place all the time.
I mean, I had a CLP meeting myself this week, and the prospect of going out and putting some leaflets was mooted, and some leafleting has already gone on actually out and about and around the constituency. And the overwhelming response, weirdly, because I would have thought with so many people being so concerned about being exposed to coronavirus, and people have been doing the right thing and staying indoors. An awful lot of them have actually been quite pleased to see people, which is somewhat unusual when you're going out and leafleting, because that's not always the response you get. But some people have just missed the sight of a human face so much. It has actually had a surprisingly positive response. I found it surprising anyway, but that by and large is not necessarily the point here. It does seem to be an unnecessary risk to be making to go out and deliver these leaflets. And of course, are the people delivering the leaflets, are they wearing gloves? Are they wearing the right, are they masked up in case people want to speak to them? Could they arguably be spreading the virus on the literature? It does seem to lack common sense still, and that perhaps phone banking would be a better idea. Sarah, you want to come in?
Yeah, I mean, there don't seem to be being any kind of guidance with regards to PPE when it comes to delivering leaflets as well. I mean, the fact that they're expecting us, those that want to do it, bearing in mind it's a battle to actually get people, it's going to be a battle to get people out to actually want to do it. There don't seem to be any kind of guidance with regards to health and safety of people that are volunteering to deliver leaflets. No PPE guidance or anything. So it is. I don't see how it's going to be difficult to get people out for both reasons. And I think the party owes a duty of care to those that are, volunteering for the party to put these guidance. This guidance out like you would do, in a workplace or trade, coming from a trade union perspective, when, the health and safety of those that are doing the work for you need to be, paramount.
Yeah.
CLP should probably be providing gloves and masks, but we haven't been asked to.
No. And, the same point stands for all the other parties as well, going out and delivering their leaflets. Without any guidance, every party essentially will be doing their own thing. And you don't know if they're gloved up or they're masked up, or how they're storing these leaflets, how many people are handling them before they even go out. I mean, these are all questions that can be asked from one CLP to another. It's going to vary from one constituency to another, one party to another. It's all going to vary. It's asking for trouble, in my opinion.
I mean, in London as well, we received it's a little brochure from the Conservative candidate for mayor. It's all high gloss, and as I understand it, the shinier the surface, the longer the virus will survive on it.
Yeah.
So I'm really I don't want that stuff through my door, because it's polluting, even if there isn't a virus out there. It's just full of nonsense. But the other thing that I got in the post this week actually was a letter telling me to fill out the census, which is obviously due at the end of this month. And the government have made a decision that that's all happening online, because obviously it saves anyone handling the paperwork. At the same time, I'm rather wondering who's going to count the votes when these ballots drop the local elections, because generally speaking, that happens in a local leisure centre, and there will be tens of council employees there physically counting each vote. So I wonder how that's going to happen and what sort of scrutiny there's actually going to be for these elections.
Yeah, and you can't help but think a counting centre like that is just going to be a concentration of COVID, because fundamentally people are going to want to cast their vote, whether they're ill or not. They've still got to cast their ballot. Essentially, not everybody does it by post. I'm sure people with postal votes are going to be as careful as they possibly can be. But ballot day is ballot day. You've got to turn out. You've got to vote to have your vote counted. If you're ill, how are you going to vote? Well, are you still going to vote? Are you going to not vote? How important is your say to you? Do you value that more than your ensuring you can cast a ballot for your chosen candidate? Are you going to put people's lives at risk or health at risk? I know so many people are asymptomatic as well. They're not necessarily even going to know if they're ill or not on that day. And you can't help but think you're going to have all these ballots, thousands, hundreds, thousands of ballots, depending on where you are in the country. And they're all going to be in one place, and people are going to be counting them. And you think, how on earth can they do that safely? It just seems bizarre that this is still even going ahead, frankly, let alone leafleting and door knocking going on as well. But this is the state of play. This is how the government are working out their priorities. They want these seats. They want these places on the council. They want to secure that. And, we've just come out of our third lockdown after all. They've never put health and safety first. They've put economic profit, and now political capital before people's well-being. The census is an interesting one as well. I mean, I was waiting for my census to come in because my neighbour had hers days ago. And I'm thinking, well, where in hell's mine? I don't want to risk a fine. If I missed it, it's the postman lost mine. So I went on the government site for the census, and you can just have the code text to you. Well, why can they not have done that as part of the course anyway? And when it comes to voting, people who want to vote by post, they have to request a postal ballot. Why could they not have had people request a postal census? Why could they not have just text the code and to people who want to complete it online and avoid touching any errant bits of paper and done this part of the course? I did mine online and sent it all off, and lo and behold, yesterday the blasted thing came through the door. So I've already done it, but I haven't. It's gone straight in the go straight in the shredder now. But it's that point. There's so much paperwork floating about at the moment. It's so avoidable. You don't need to handle it.
No.
Why could they not have done this better?
And so surely it's cheaper for government to say, do you want an online census or do you want a paper one as well, rather than sending everybody a paper one? And it just doesn't make sense.
No.
Not this day and age.
No, they've had 10 years to plan for this, really, to move on with the times. COVID not necessarily even being a factor. Why, when you only do this every 10 years, they're not being able to work out another way of doing this? I mean, they can soon inflict online, having to go online for universal credit and things like that.
Mm.
But the 10-year annual census, 10-year census, when it comes out, it's they've had so much time to get to grips and could have done exactly the same with it. And it's a massive stack of paper as well. I mean, it really is a lengthy thing these days. I mean, for those of us like me who do family history and stuff like that, and you look back on censuses in days of yore, it was very, very much less information that was collected. These days, they want to know what you've had for dinner last night, practically. It starts to get a little bit intrusive. You wonder, well, you used to have problems getting people to complete the census once upon a time anyway, because they simply wanted people to say, mind your own business. Why do you want to know all this stuff from me? It's gone from the sublime to the ridiculous now with what they're asking for. I mean,
it is interesting when you look at like older ones, because you can see, because I'm like that interested in in history of council housing and things, and it's interesting when you see them from like the like 1920s, 30s, 40s, about the difference, things that people have the house, have they got a bathroom, and how everything moves inside and what facilities they've got in the houses and things like that. So it is good for looking at stuff like that, even though it seems ridiculous.
Fortunately, my house was only isn't that old, so I haven't had to really look up who was here before that. I think the chap who was here before was I think he took the place on when it was first built, just after the World War, I think. But for older properties, it's certainly very interesting. My mother's got an old cottage, and working out how that was modified and all the rest of it. She had she had a bit of a chimney collapse last year, which I crowdfunded for to try and help her out. And they've discovered an old fireplace in the upstairs bedroom that we never knew existed. So it's just amazing how these places ended up moving. But anyway, we've digressed away from the Tory corruption somewhat, so we need to get back on track a little bit. Let's talk NHS pay rise that isn't, because this is another scandal that's rumbling on. The Tories apparently are going to raise their pathetic 1% pay rise, which, after inflation and additional taxes coming in, amounts to a pay cut. As we know, Labour watered down their manifesto pledge of 2019, which was a 5% pay rise, and then to look at it and see potentially raise it again in order to give it a fair wage for a fair day's work for NHS workers. But that's gone out the window. It's been watered down to a 2.1% pay rise, which is still also a pay cut, and again pays into this whole Tory lightism, which seems to be infecting our party again, to cut things, but not necessarily by how much the Tories are going to do it. It's still pathetic, and it's lacked vision, because the Tories can so easily combat this by saying, oh, you've gone 2.1%, we'll go a little bit better, and all those local election pledges will still come unto us, even though the NHS actually isn't a local election issue as such, because it's run from a national perspective. But they'll still gain political capital out of it at a time of elections. It will still be in people's minds. A cut is a cut. And it's little wonder we've seen a little bit of slow clapping going on this week as a result of this weak lack of viable vision. These people deserve a proper pay rise, don't they? We've seen 15% going on. I interviewed people from the NHS last weekend who wanted 15% pay rise. Independent Sage, absolutely supportive of this as well on that night. Why are Labour being so useless and pathetic and weak over this? Come on, it's the NHS. We're supposed to be the party of the NHS. Give them a pay rise, yes?
Yeah, I mean, £3.20 a week is the average pay rise, which will be gobbled up and more with inflation and also stealth income tax that's been introduced by this government. What was really disheartening and embarrassing actually this week was when the deputy leader, that awful car crash interview, where she couldn't justify the fact that our frontline key workers, they're absolute warriors, are going to be forced into worse living conditions. Because I had Helen O'Connor from the GMB on my NHS show in the week just gone.
Yes, indeed.
And she was describing, what real-term pay cut actually means. We're seeing more and more, like in London, where the cost of living is particularly high, we're seeing more and more NHS staff having to live further away from work. And then you've got the exorbitant car parking fees that staff are having to pay, despite the number of long shifts they're having to work. And we're also seeing nurses are unable to survive and feed their families on their current wages. They can't afford a real terms pay cut, and they're having to take on additional hours and overtime in order to make ends meet. And this is going to lead to medical accidents and mistakes being made by overworked, overtired nurses who we need to be able to rely on absolutely to keep us and our loved ones safe, particularly when we're battling this killer virus.
Yeah. Sarah, you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I mean, the 2.1% that we're coming out with, it's just, to me, it's just symptomatic of everything that we're doing at the minute. There's no vision. There's no, what our party's supposed to do is we're supposed to set out how better lives, people's lives can be with us, and that's what we're supposed to do. What we're doing at the moment, it was the same with when the Tories were talking about, with the workers' rights, after leaving EU, we were happy with, keeping, we made it a big thing that we were happy with a 48-hour working week. Or you can, we'll fight for you to, keep, the fact that you can take a break. That's not good enough. That's not the maximum that we've got to hope for. You've got to be, fighting for a 4-day working week. And that's what we were doing in 2019. And it's the same with this, with the NHS. We put 5%. I would have liked to have seen a bigger number, but it was still higher than what the Tories were doing. And like Bonnie said, we can easily be outmanoeuvred, and it's happening. And there's just no vision, there's no passion. It's just beige all the time, and I'm absolutely getting fed up of it.
Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. I mean, the RNHS, they keep being described as heroes. They've had claps, but claps don't pay the bills. So often they've had to, they've lacked the PPE because PPE contracts have been given to people that are more inclined to support the Conservatives than actually be able to deliver the right material, the right classification of product, from pest control companies to bin bags, having to wear bin bags essentially. It's been ridiculous, the lack of support NHS workers have had when they've had the pretty much single most difficult job going over the last year. They're exhausted. All they are asking for is a decent wage to be able to support themselves instead of having to rely on food banks to feed them, as so many nurses actually do. It's absolutely frustrating. It's really, really angering to people that want these people to do well. And at the end of the day, everybody should want health workers to be well supported, because if they're not well supported, if they are not being able to feed themselves properly, if they haven't got the right equipment, if they haven't got the right products and materials in there to deliver their services properly, then they're not going to be able to look after us properly when we need those services, when not just about regarding COVID and people who are sick, but people who need to access ordinary ongoing NHS services, cancer care, other treatments as things have been going on. We need these people to be at the top of their game to be able to ensure that we're looked after well. It's so obvious that these people should be the ones that are looked after as well as can be as expected. And when the Prime Minister himself had his life literally saved by these people, it makes it even more condemnable that he won't just put his hands up and say, yes, you need this, we're going to give it to you. And the opposition should be saying that and screaming that and rubbing it in his face, frankly. But instead they're going, we'll go slightly higher.
I mean, I think a really important thing to recognise in all of this isn't about cruelty to the nurses. It's about a systematic and deliberate breaking up of the NHS. It's undermining the services which we all need and rely on. I think it was Tony Benn who described the standard process of privatisation. You underfund it, run it down, you make it look as unappealing as possible so that those who've got a few quid in their bank account at the end of the month pay to go private, and then there's no one left to fight for it, preserve it as a service that is there for us all, regardless of our means, free at the point of need and delivered by locally, publicly employed, directly employed staff within the NHS. It's about letting the private sector in and making it look considerably better than what we can afford collectively for a national health service.
Yeah. Right. We will move on from that to right to protest. This has come under attack. The Tories are going to take away your right to protest. They want to silence dissent, it would appear. They want to stop people from being able to protest. We've heard this come from the Good Law Project this week, that hidden in the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Bill 2021 that's coming in, there are provisions to dictate where protests can take place, how long they can go on for, and how noisy they're allowed to be. Now, the point of a protest is to voice unhappiness with something, peaceful dissent in effect, to inform the government or whoever and tell them you're not happy with something. It's pretty much the only vehicle we've got in between casting a vote every 5 years in order to send a message. The government don't seem to want to listen anymore, apparently. They don't want us to be able to effectively protest peacefully and tell them what we're not happy in between those 5 years that they come searching for our general election vote. Now, you can't clamp down on right to protest. You can't expect people to just not do it. They will. But I fear what we'll see here is a lack of peaceful organisation, I would suggest. More arrests likely as people become less organised and still have those same frustrations, still have those same issues, so still want to be able to voice their opinions and send a message, essentially. And I fear we're going to see a return to the bad old days of protests when they were essentially clamped down on, when strike action was, the response to strike action and organised protest. We see responses more in line with, I suppose the example that springs to mind is Orgreave, really, where you had the police sent in with no holds barred, essentially, to clamp down on any form of protest, on any form of dissent. It's a worrying precedent, and it's a very, very regressive step, I would suggest, that we do this. Do you think we face similar dangers? Am I exaggerating? Am I getting a little bit conspiracy theorist, or is this what we're looking at?
I'm really afraid it is. I mean, you mentioned Orgreave. Another thing that happened about 19 years ago were the women protesters at Greenham Common that were protesting against the nuclear base being put there. And I saw footage actually last night. It was women standing around the perimeter fence holding hands because they didn't want the nuclear base there. And they showed footage of the police physically dragging these women with their children, in some cases, away from the protest. despite the draconian laws that were in place back in 1982, obviously this is Thatcherism, they were being pulled away and arrested, and as soon as they broke free, running around and protesting again. You know, they stayed on that base for years and years and years and years. But, you know, the current climate, okay, I think that perhaps even peaceful protest and gathering is perhaps not a good idea because of risk of transmission of coronavirus. But I am concerned what it means for our democratic rights anyway. I mean, the big case that we've had in the last couple of days is the Women's Vigil on Clapham Common, which again, it's just down the road from me. I seem to live in the middle of all of this stuff for some reason. You know, there was going to be a peaceful vigil for women's safety and women's rights at Clapham Common, and that's been absolutely clamped down. The police have threatened legal action and prosecution and fines and so on for the women that are organising that, stand up against the attacks that are happening all too frequently against women.
Sarah, Orgreave, are we looking at that sort of a level of dissent and you know where we're going to end up with?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, same as what Bonnie said. In the current climate, the COVID-19 pandemic, obviously we're not able to protest like we usually are. But this is just like, this is a permanent rolling back of our rights. You know, the sign of a healthy democracy is people's right to protest, you know, without, you know, being blocked to. And what they're trying to do is use, you know, movements like Black Lives Matter and Extinction Rebellion, you know, to increase use like facial recognition, even though a court, after it were using, like with South Wales, they said it breached equality rights and the right to privacy, and they're wanting to bring this into law. And it's just like, you know, it's a right on our, you know, our fundamental democratic right to protest. And it's like they're using the COVID-19 pandemic, as I thought they would, to be quite honest. They're using it to their advantage to try and roll back any dissent, any kind of protest. And, you know, this has got to be fought. And, you know, obviously we're looking to our party to fight it, but I won't hold my breath.
No, I mean, it is does very much sound like they're using the COVID crisis to their advantage to get this kind of pernicious policy through. And the longer the COVID crisis rumbles on for, the more we can see them try to do this, that, or the other under the guise of we need to do it to protect the people. And it's a worrying precedent when you start saying, well, we need to do this for your own safety. We need to do this for your own protection. When democracy, it seems to be dying as a result of that. It is anti-democratic to not be able to protest, to be able to not go out and have your say on something. We've all got freedom of speech. So much is said of freedom of speech. The right to protest is very much freedom of speech. It's freedom of expression. It's something that needs to be fought to be maintained. Yes, okay, we can clearly see the common sense in it being not necessarily the safest thing to do right now. We don't want people to be gathering in large numbers in public places, like, for instance, a ballot booth, if we come back to that. But it's that same sort of, it's that sort of common sense thinking. Yes, okay, we can't protest right now, but a time will come when this COVID crisis hopefully is over. We can finally put it behind us in this country. And there will be issues that we want to talk about and raise again. And if the government comes across as not wanting to listen, then people are going to protest against that. You can try and legislate against that if you want, but people are still going to protest. You can't have, you know, we've seen some of the huge marches in London, for example. Bonnie, I'm sure you've taken part in one or two yourself, yeah, where you've gone down those streets, you've gone down past Downing Street, or you've blocked the traffic here, there, and everywhere to have your say on a subject that's close to your heart. People are going to do that again. You can't, arrest tens, hundreds of thousands of people that have gathered in Trafalgar Square just because they've decided to exercise their right to protest.
Yeah,
it's a freedom of speech issue.
It really is. It wasn't that long ago. We had the poll tax, what they called riots, didn't they? And the thing is, if you remove people's right to gather and campaign and protest about something, what you're going to end up with is something that's a lot more troubling than an organised, planned for protest. You know, you have to be, sometimes as politicians, they ought to be careful of what they're wishing for. I mean, it was like a century ago or so that they established Speaker's Corner at Hyde Park. I think this lot would be looking to abolish even people standing on soapboxes in our parks to proclaim the problems with what's going on. You know, we've historically as a country, we've looked with great disdain at countries that have clamped down on protesting and so on. You know, I'm thinking of things like Tiananmen Square and all of that. I mean, I don't think our government are going to go that far, but I think they would be looking to punish people that are raising their voices in opposition to the government.
Yeah,
I think these things are so easily taken away from us, and it can be the start of a slippery slope.
Now, I think it would be churlish to not acknowledge the fact that we have celebrated International Women's Day this week. I'm delighted to be joined today by two wonderful women, very close to me, from Socialist Telly. I love you both dearly. We've had, but you know, it's been marred by what we've seen regarding Meghan Markle this week, what we've seen in the case of Sarah Everard this week. I think in both instances we've seen the issue of violence towards women being portrayed perhaps as an issue that is for women to deal with, and I as a man do not agree with that point. I think the issue with women being attacked is that women are being attacked and are very much the victims here, and it is not for them to, in my opinion, it is not an issue for them to fix. It is an issue with men to fix, and that, you know, we need fewer cases of what has happened with Sarah Everard, and as has happened up and down the country. In fact, so often cases of domestic violence are not even seen as a story big enough for the press, unless it's I mean, in this instance, I think it's a police officer has been arrested and is charged. Well, I don't know if he's been charged yet, but he's been arrested in connection with this attack and murder of Sarah Everard, whose remains have sadly been found in Kent. And then, of course, we've seen with Meghan Markle, she's been attacked relentlessly over and over again, so often by the same individual on our televisions. And you have to wonder, what are we celebrating women being attacked here? Has it been marred? How should International Women's Day be recognised, guys?
I'd like to see some positive action to protect women against domestic violence. Domestic violence rates have gone up through this pandemic as people have been stuck at home, you know, whereas previously, if a woman was being abused at home and she did have a job to go to, someone might have noticed what was going on. Domestic violence kills in the UK an average of 3 women a week, and yet we barely hear about it. There was a case locally to me a couple of years ago where a woman who had escaped an abusive relationship had moved away from the local area, but was still having to take her children to the school that he attended previously because of the issue of achieving school places in London. You know, it's not easily done. And she was actually, her ex-partner actually stalked her, sat in the car park of the park that was opposite more or less the kids' school. And when she went with her 3-year-old to collect her older child from school, he stabbed her to death 7 times in the neck in front of all the other mums doing the school run. And, you know, he has been convicted and he is in prison for a very long time. The police were aware that there was a problem, and there just wasn't enough protection put in place to look after that woman and the children that were affected. And this is just one of the few stories we hear about what goes on for women. I think that the Sarah Everard case, I don't know if there was a relationship between herself and the police officer, but it's certainly a fact that, you know, I know that when my friends have said goodnight, you know, if they've been round here, I've always said, you just give us a text message to let us know you've got home okay. And I don't think men do the same thing. And you know, as someone said on social media the other day, we only actually realised in the light of this case, the reason that women instinctively say, can you just give us a message when you're home, is so that we know that they've not been killed on their way home, know that they're still alive and they got home in one piece. We shouldn't have to be living like this. It's just unbelievable, really. It's just accepted. 97% of all women have been sexually assaulted.
It's horrendous. It's absolutely horrific that, you know, women are living in this country with that kind of fear, that mentality, and that experience, so many of them. And as a man, no, we don't think about it, not typically. I mean, if one of my kids has gone off, I mean, even my 18-year-old, when he's taken off with his girlfriend over to her house, we generally, I will say, you know, make sure you let us know you got there all right and such a thing. But yeah, that's my son. I have that, you know, bond with him. If it was one of my blokey mates, and you know, I have fairly blokey mates as a former welder, no, I wouldn't even occur to me to ask him, you know, make sure you let me know if you get home safe. He called me some, you know, derogatory term about being soft, or to that extent. But yeah, it just goes to show that this is an issue that women are very much the victims in these stories. They wouldn't feel they would have to text their mates to let them know if you get home safe if there wasn't this fear, this innate fear that something could happen to them, because it happens so often. This is a lived-in experience, and I don't think men are connected or tapped into that at all. Where do you come in with this point of view, Sarah?
Yeah, I think what's happened this week, I think it's made a lot of women realize to feel like that. Like Bonnie says, you know, when you've left your mate, you know, give me a quick text when you get home, so I know you've got home safe. You might take a picture of the register of the exit. You might write the plate down just in case. You know, it's, you get your keys out ready, so you don't have to stand at your door with, you know, messing with your keys. It's all things like that. Every woman in the country has done at least one of those things, and you don't. And I think it's made a lot of women angry that this is so normalised. This people's right to protest, you know, with behaviour. There's been blocked off movements like Black Lives Matter and everything, and they wanted to bring this to democratic right to protest. Oh, they wanted to be, when you used to walk down the main road, she used to go off to her house, and then, you know, when I've spoken to my mum about it, I said I used to stick to the main road because as quickly as possible to get home, and that's just normal behaviour, and I think it's made a lot of women angry to know that we've grown up like that, you know, easily taken away from us. And even now I'm like, they are not getting in a taxi at 2 o'clock in the morning. I will come and fetch you, you know, and you just realize how vulnerable you actually are. You don't realize, especially don't realize it when you're young, but she was, you know, and you've all, yeah, I think it is to feel like that, this historic blaming of women for these attacks. I've seen there was right to protest, you know, movements like Black Lives Matter there was a display of the clothes that they were wearing when they were sexually assaulted, to try and break through the men. And we're not on about individual men. It's things like that. Every woman normalise this behaviour, violence. You know, 87% of crimes against a person are done by male. Like younger people, leave the pub, and then, you know, 97% and sexual offences. And you know, yes, some of the victims might be male, but they're still done by males. So there's this like societal thing that what's happening, and you know, you just realise how but this historic blaming of women who are being sexually assaulted with the men, and it's something that men need to be asking about what's happening, you know, within the male section of society. This kind of society, what's happening to make.
Yeah, I think men need to start to become more aware of this. I would hope that these issues that have been highlighted this week at International Women's Day, with what has happened in this high-profile murder case, men need to become more aware. Now, nobody's saying that every man in the country, you know, is a danger to women, but certainly women,
of course not,
about can certainly feel like that, and can, you know, if you've got a man walking home behind you late at night, it makes the woman in front perhaps feel a little uncomfortable, a little nervous, and it's an easy thing to just cross the road and not be directly behind them. I think it's a simple gesture, really. Just be aware of how you may make the person in front of you feel, or make sure the environment that a woman may find herself in is not an uncomfortable one, and one where she becomes fearful. I think greater awareness is the message here, and I hope that is a message that's certainly gone to a lot of men this week with what has been said in the press in this high-profile case in this week. Now, to finish, we always do aim to try and become a little bit more of end on a positive note, should we say? And I think the most positive thing we've seen this week has come from Labour MP for Hemsworth, John Trickett, who has come out in the media this week with a video of his own, with the two words simply "brace yourself." And you have to wonder who that message is going to. I'd like to think it's going to Keir Starmer myself, to basically show him how a broadcast should be done. And he's produced his excellent video, which is covering all manner of issues that relate to our everyday lives. And it is a bit of a smack in the teeth to the videos that Starmer has done, which again seem to focus on himself personally now. Have you guys seen the video that John's put out? What did you make of it?
I loved it. It's so great to see one of our MPs actually making the case for the things that we're all fighting for, at membership level.
Sarah?
Yeah, it was definitely brace yourself, weren't it? It was like, come on, John, let's have you. Lead this in. But no, it was very good. Yeah, and I think it made us all feel a bit more positive that that MP was making a video like that, and getting us all. I think it put us all on a positive keel, didn't it? I think seeing it, and and it was great to see how many people, how many positive comments there were about it as well. So yeah, it was very good. I think it was needed. Yeah,
it's just felt like the sort of thing that we went. One of those videos that we used to see, some of like the videos that Simon Baker used to make on behalf of the Labour Party, the ones that used to get you going, yes, that's what we want, that's what we stand for, let's have some more of that. We haven't had that for so long. It felt like such a refreshing, oh yes, this is what reminds me of why I got into the Labour Party to start with. This is what we want to fight for. These are the policies we stand for. This is what we want to do. This is the sort of thing we want to see. These are the things that get members energized and excited and think, yes, this is what we want to campaign on because this is what people need. And it was very telling at the very end of that video that John Trickett had to put at the end, John Trickett for Labour, not the Labour Party itself, because it has to be a shot across the bows. Is he positioning himself? We've asked this before, haven't we? He hasn't answered the question yet. What do you reckon? Is he going to go for it?
I sincerely hope so. Our party and our activists are being hollowed out from the inside. Something like that video from John really it's something to fight for, doesn't it? The gloves are off now.
It does. It made you want to, because we need the kind of videos that make you want to go, right, where are those leaflets? Let's get them out. Do you know? And we need stuff like that, and we're just not getting it from party in general. So that was very good. It was needed, like I said.
Yeah, gimme. Let's have those leaflets. Let's get out campaigning. These are the ones that we get. It does. I mean, when you enthuse your membership, they want to get out there and they want to support you. And this is why I say to those local election candidates that we've got coming out there, make sure your leaflets are full of stuff that will enthuse your membership and not full of Keith, because that is what will get you going. It's what you want to get out there. You want to send that Labour message about what we stand for and turn that out on the doorstep, since we're allowed to, bizarrely. Get out on the doorstep in your leaflets, get posting through the door, and get this.
The only consideration,
even if it's at local level.
The only concern I've got there, Damo, sorry for jumping in, is if it inspires our members to get on those phones and do the phone banking, we have to have that meeting, that Zoom meeting with Keir and G, or can we say no thanks, it's all right, pass it on to somebody else?
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? On that bombshell, I think we're at the end of our time. We may even have run over, which means we'll get our editor will get cross with us. But it's been an absolute delight to join you both today on this call. And I hope the people who are watching this have enjoyed it and have been informed by it. And we should be back for another weekly roundup next week, when no doubt there will be more news to pour over. Cheers, folks.
Lovely. Thank you. Bye.
Thank